Did you know that one unforgettable moment on Soul Train was so shocking, fans still believe it marked the beginning of the end for the entire show? For decades, Soul Train wasn't just television, it was a cultural revolution. Every Saturday morning, millions tuned in for the music, the fashion, the dancing, and the feeling that this was more than entertainment. It was pride. It was identity. It was a celebration the world had never seen before. But behind the flashing lights and legendary performances, there was tension building. Rumors, scandals, and mistakes that would slowly chip away at the Hippest Trip in America. And when that infamous scene finally happened, it left a scar so deep that Soul Train never truly recovered. Stay with me, because we're about to dive into the rise, the glory, and the shocking downfall of a show that defined generations. When Soul Train first aired in 1971, nobody could have predicted it would change the face of television forever. This wasn't just another music show, it was a cultural lifeline. For the first time, Black talent, Black fashion, and Black identity were being celebrated unapologetically on national TV. Every Saturday morning, families gathered around their screens to watch dancers glide down the iconic Soul Train line, showing off styles that would soon sweep across the country. It wasn't just about the moves, it was about the energy, the freedom, and the pride that came with seeing young Black culture at the center of American pop culture. At a time when mainstream media often painted Black communities with stereotypes or ignored them completely, Soul Train flipped the script. It brought joy, unity, and empowerment into living rooms across America. The show wasn't simply entertainment, it was a statement. We're here, we matter, and we're not going anywhere. From music to fashion, the influence was undeniable. The show launched dance crazes, set trends in style, and gave rising artists the stage they needed to become legends. And for millions of fans, Soul Train became more than just a Saturday ritual. It was a movement. But while viewers saw a glittering celebration of culture, behind the scenes, Don Cornelius, the man who built the empire, had a much bigger mission. At the heart of Soul Train was one man, Don Cornelius. Tall, smooth-voiced, always dressed sharp, Cornelius wasn't just the host, he was the architect of an entirely new way of seeing Black America on television. Before Soul Train, the airwaves were flooded with one-sided stories. News stations endlessly reported crime in Black neighborhoods, while barely mentioning the struggles that fueled those conditions. Positive stories, authentic voices, and true representation, practically non-existent. Cornelius saw it, he felt it, and he knew it had to change. That's why he built Soul Train, not as a copy of the mainstream shows, but as a direct challenge to them. He had been inspired by American Bandstand, but he refused to let his version water down the culture. Instead, he filled his stage with local teens, real dancers and artists who carried the full weight of Black excellence. Cornelius wasn't just looking to entertain. He wanted to uplift. His vision was to create a pipeline for talent. A space where Black musicians could premiere their songs, dancers could showcase their originality, and audiences could finally see themselves celebrated with pride. And he made sure that the production team behind the cameras reflected that same mission, hiring Black professionals across the board when very few shows dared to do that. The result? A platform where giants like Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, and the Jackson 5 didn't just perform, they created history. And soon, Soul Train wasn't chasing stars anymore. The stars were chasing Soul Train. But Cornelius's vision came with its own challenges. He wanted control. He wanted perfection. And as the years went on, that iron grip would both protect the show's legacy and slowly tighten around its future. If you ask fans what made Soul Train unforgettable, most won't talk about the lighting or the set, they'll talk about the performances. Week after week, legends stepped onto that stage and gave the world moments that still echo through music history. Take 1973, when a young Michael Jackson and his brothers, the Jackson 5, performed Dancing Machine. It was on Soul Train that Michael unveiled the robot dance for the first time. The crowd froze, the cameras zoomed in, and history was made. What looked like a simple mechanical movement at the time would go on to influence pop culture for decades. And it all started right there on the Soul Train stage. Then came Patti LaBelle and LaBelle's electrifying 1975 performance of Lady Marmalade. Draped in metallic, futuristic outfits, they weren't just singing a song, they were inventing a whole new aesthetic. That moment is often credited with bringing Afrofuturism into the mainstream, years before it became a movement. And who could forget Al Green in 1974? Dressed in neon shoes with one arm in a sling and the other holding a single rose, he sang live, something almost no artist dared to do on the show. His voice shook the stage, raw and soulful, proving that even injury couldn't hold back his magic. For 7 straight minutes the audience was locked in, witnessing a performance that blurred the line between music and pure emotion. Even the Soul Train line itself became a performance. A simple concept, 2 rows of dancers leaving a pathway for individuals to strut down, turned into one of the most iconic traditions in television history. Each dancer brought their own style, their own flair, and sometimes even their own props. It wasn't just choreography, it was individuality exploding on screen. But not every performance went as planned. Some moments, unforgettable for all the wrong reasons, started to crack the polished image Soul Train had built. And what happened behind the scenes would prove even more explosive than what happened under the stage lights. On screen, Soul Train looked like pure joy, bright lights, fierce fashion, and dancers who seemed stompable. But behind the camera, things weren't always so glamorous. The dancers, who gave the show its heartbeat, worked under brutal conditions. Episodes were filmed in marathon sessions, sometimes 4 shows crammed into a single weekend. That meant multiple outfit changes, endless rehearsals, and stamina that had to last for hours under hot studio lights. And here's the shocking part. Unless they were performing alongside an artist, many of those dancers weren't paid at all. For a show built on celebrating black talent, this reality hit hard. Some dancers saw Soul Train as a golden ticket to exposure, launching them into careers as choreographers, singers, or even stars in their own right. But others grew frustrated, feeling exploited by a system that demanded everything from them while giving back very little. The pressure wasn't just on the dancers. Don Cornelius, ever the perfectionist, ran the production with a tight grip. He wanted the show to stay polished, professional, and true to his vision. But his relentless standards created tension with both performers and producers. When conflicts rose, they were usually kept off screen, but whispers of frustration grew louder as the years went on. And while fans tuned in for the music and the dancing, the cracks were already beginning to show behind the scenes. The joy of Soul Train was real, but so were the struggles. What nobody knew at the time was that these problems would soon collide with onstage controversies that left fans stunned and the show's reputation shaken. For years, Soul Train was untouchable. It was the place where legends were born and culture was shaped. But then came the moments that fans would never forget. Moments that didn't shine, but cracked the perfect image Don Cornelius worked so hard to protect. One of the earliest stumbles came in 1975, when David Bowie stepped onto the Soul Train stage. Bowie was already a superstar, known for his eccentric style and boundary-pushing music. But on that day, nerves and maybe a little too much to drink got the best of him. Struggling to remember lyrics, he needed multiple takes just to get through his set. For a show built on energy and precision, the performance felt awkward and out of place. Backstage, Cornelius was furious. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a blemish on the show's reputation for excellence. Then, in 1989, the scandal that nearly destroyed Soul Train's credibility, Milli Vanilli. Don Cornelius proudly introduced them as groundbreaking stars from Europe, but within months, the truth came crashing down. They hadn't sung a single note of their own music. Every hit, every performance, every moment on stage had been a lie. When the lip-syncing scandal erupted, Soul Train was caught in the fallout. How could the show that gave Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder their stage now be remembered for backing frauds? Fans were outraged, and trust in the brand began to fade. And while the scandals piled up, the music world itself was changing. Hip-hop was exploding. rewriting the rules of popular culture. But Cornelius, he didn't get it. He resisted the shift, often dismissing rap as a passing fad. His hesitation meant that while other platforms like MTV and BET leaned into the movement, Soul Train felt stuck in the past. The very audience that once relied on it for the newest trends started looking elsewhere. These controversies, some born from bad luck, others from stubborn choices, turned Soul Train's once gleaming legacy into shaky ground. And soon, even Don Cornelius himself would face a moment that no one saw coming. By the mid-1980s, Soul Train was no longer the unstoppable force it once was. The world of music and television was shifting at lightning speed, and the show that had once defined cool suddenly started to feel out of touch. Hip-hop was on the rise, becoming the heartbeat of a new generation. MTV and BET were giving young audiences a platform that felt modern, raw, and edgy. Meanwhile, Soul Train, with its disco roots and polished style, struggled to keep up. For a show that had once set every trend, it now seemed to be following them, always one step behind. At the center of it all was Don Cornelius. He had built Soul Train from the ground up. But by the late 80s, he felt disconnected from the new wave of artists. He famously admitted that he didn't understand hip-hop, and that resistance was costly. Acts that could have re-energized the show chose other platforms instead, leaving Soul Train stuck in the shadow of its own legacy. And then came 1993. After more than 2 decades as the face and voice of the show, Cornelius signed off for the final time with his signature words: love, peace, and soul. Fans didn't know it then, but his departure marked the true beginning of the end. Without Cornelius's charisma, vision, and steady hand, Soul Train struggled to find its footing. New hosts tried to fill the gap, but the magic was gone. Behind the scenes, the show faced mounting challenges: declining ratings, frustrated dancers, and a lack of major artists willing to appear. What had once been a Saturday morning ritual was now a fading memory, and with every missed opportunity, the energy that made Soul Train a movement slowly slipped away. Still, there was one moment, an infamous scene that fans point to as the straw that broke the camel's back. A scene so shocking, so embarrassing, that it became forever linked with the show's downfall. When fans look back on Soul Train's long run, there's one moment that still gets whispered about. The infamous scene many believe marked the beginning of the end. It wasn't just a slip-up. It was a turning point that left viewers stunned, and it exposed the cracks the show could no longer hide. In 1989, Soul Train proudly welcomed Milli Vanilli, a flashy European duo introduced as the next big thing. They had the look, the moves, and chart-topping hits. Don Cornelius himself hyped them up as trailblazers, calling them the first rap stars from Europe to conquer America. The performance went off without a hitch, at least on the surface. But within months, the truth exploded like a bombshell. Milli Vanilli hadn't sung a single note of their own songs. Every performance, every award, every moment on stage had been a lie. When the scandal came out, it didn't just take down the group, it dragged Soul Train into the fallout. Fans couldn't believe that the same stage that once introduced Michael Jackson's Robot and Al Green's Soulful Magic was now associated with frauds. For a show built on authenticity and pride, it was devastating. Some point to another infamous moment: David Bowie's shaky, intoxicated appearance in 1975, when he stumbled through his lyrics and needed multiple takes. That performance embarrassed the show's perfectionist host and chipped away at its credibility. But it was the Milli Vanilli scandal that stuck like glue, leaving a stain that never fully washed out. Viewers started asking a question no show wants to hear. If Soul Train could put frauds on stage, what else about the show wasn't real? For a brand built on trust, that doubt was lethal. The infamous scene wasn't just one bad performance. It became a symbol of how far the show had drifted from its roots, how much it had struggled to keep up with the times, and how the magic of Soul Train was slipping away for good. When Soul Train finally signed off in 2006, it wasn't just the end of a TV show, it was the end of an era. For 35 years it had been more than music and dance. It was pride, It was culture. It was a revolution that gave a generation the chance to see themselves celebrated in a way the world had never seen before. Yes, scandals and controversies chipped away at its shine. Yes, the rise of MTV BET, hip-hop, left it struggling to keep up. And yes, that infamous scene with Milli Vanilli became a shadow the show could never quite escape. But none of that erases what Soul Train gave us. It gave us Michael Jackson's first robot. It gave us Al Green singing live with a rose in his hand. It gave us the unforgettable Soul Train line, a celebration of individuality and freedom that still inspires TikTok dancers decades later. And it gave us Don Cornelius, signing off with his legendary words, "Love, peace, and soul." For fans who grew up with it, Soul Train was never just television. It was a movement. It was the soundtrack to their youth, the stage that made them feel seen, and the reminder that Black culture was powerful, beautiful, and unstoppable. And even though the train has left the station, its legacy is everywhere in the beats we dance to, the fashion we wear, and the way music brings us together. Soul Train didn't just change television, it changed history, and for that, it will never truly be gone.